All right, I have a great show for you guys today. I have with me today filmmaker and author Dinesh D'Souza, who is well known in conservative circles for defending conservative values and also pointing out the blatant hypocrisy of the left and their attack on the United States of America. Dinesh, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, just for people that don't know you, I want to let them know that you are a New York Times bestselling author. You've put out several documentary films, such as 2000 Mules, Obama's America, Death of a Nation, and Hillary's America. I consider you to be one of the sharpest conservatives in the country and have about 20 questions on how we can improve the nation and fight for our values. But you have a new movie out called Police State and wanted to just right up front let people know how they can learn more about that or see the movie.
The movie is available now in streaming and also in DVD. And the one-stop shop is to go to the website, which is policestatefilm.net. Policestatefilm.net. There are multiple platforms on which it's streaming, so you can choose how you want to watch it, and then a couple of places from which you can also order DVDs. So policestatefilm.net is the place to go.
Okay, I will. I'll definitely put that in the notes down below so that people can click and just go right to it. For lack of a better word, the deep state worked tirelessly to make Donald Trump look bad. We also know this same group of actors, Trump haters, if you will, use their connections, their positions of authority to cover up the Hunter Biden laptop story. Your film goes into this in detail. How much coordination are you aware of that was going on between the alphabet agencies and the social media companies to cover up the Biden story?
The coordination is extensive and is now well documented. At the time it happened, the nature of how it worked was not so clear. There was assumed to be some coordination, but no one really knew how much. A major breakthrough came when Elon Musk bought Twitter, now X, and exposed through the Twitter files the way that the government was working with Twitter, because obviously the government was working in the same way with Facebook and with Google and with YouTube. Now, the censorship continues really at YouTube and at Google. The Supreme Court is going to take up a case next spring, which might squash this stuff. It won't end censorship, by the way, but it will remove the grubby hands of the government from the censorship process. And that will alone be some progress. So, for people who haven't been following it, the digital platforms opened up massive kind of windows or portals, and the government would just drop massive amounts of data into those portals. These are the 8,000 people who need to be banned on COVID. These are the 15,000 people who have been talking about election fraud. So, in other words, we're not talking about the government proposing one-offs, like let's get rid of Jordan Peterson or let's get rid of Dinesh D'Souza. They have been combing the web and pulling up thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of names for people to be restricted, shadow banned, and sometimes this is being done without your knowledge, and you think your channel is marching along just fine, and then you realize, wait a minute, only 7 people are seeing what I post.
Wow, I didn't realize it was even to that extent. I covered the Twitter files on my show, but you're saying it was in the thousands of people that they were just dumping massive amounts of blacklist data?
Hundreds of thousands of people. In other words, what happens these days is there's a whole academic industry of professors who purport to be experts in misinformation. Now, it's interesting how one qualifies to get that kind of a title. But nevertheless, what these guys do is they follow accounts like mine and other people too, and not all big accounts, small accounts too. And they compile these lists. Now, the Biden administration then takes these lists and sorts them by category. So if it's supposed to be like, let's just say, a health misinformation, it goes to the CDC. If it is in misinformation regarding elections, it may go to this group called CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency. And so you have multiple agencies of the government involved, not 2 or 3, more like 50. And what these agencies then do, they are reluctant to go directly to the digital platforms, although they sometimes do, because that's a little bit too blatant a violation of the First Amendment. So they will often hand over these names to middlemen, like the Stanford Internet Observatory or the Virality Project, and then the middlemen go to the digital platforms, almost like they're the courier of the blacklisted names of people, and then the digital platforms sort of do the deed and either restrict you or ban you or pull down your whole channel altogether. So notice that censorship in America is not just done by the state. It is an octopus stretching across the public and the private sector both.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I remember when the Hunter Biden laptop story first hit. I read it and I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is going to be very, very damaging to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. Then all of a sudden the New York Post was blocked on Twitter. That story was taken down. Then Facebook was like, wait a minute, if they're doing it, then we're doing it. And all of a sudden every agency, like it's like they all jumped on the same bandwagon to block this story, and it worked. Millions and millions of Americans never knew that this story was happening. And I learned from your film that the FBI had the Hunter Biden laptop 11 months in advance of that situation and the election. So do you think that they had like 5 to 10 different scenarios on how to block that, depending on how and where that story started popping up?
Yeah, I think that their way of doing it was to round up a prominent cadre of senior intelligence officials who were then willing to put their credibility on the line and say, to us, it looks like it has the hallmarks. This was their keyword, hallmark, sort of signature of a Russian intelligence operation. Now, these intelligence officials were doing this to help Biden in a very conscious way. It was organized that way. And so you have these intelligence officials providing the kind of sophisticated cover, and then you have the media. Now, this is a story unto itself, because if this was a Stalinist or a fascist regime in the classical sense, let's just say Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia, the central government controls everything. They have a propaganda ministry. In the Nazi case, of course, it was Joseph Goebbels. And so the propaganda ministry tells you what you can and cannot publish. But in America, we don't have that, right? We have thousands of independent journalists. We have hundreds of news organizations. So now you have a puzzle, a conundrum, which is that these organizations do not conspire in any classical sense of the term. They don't go on an early morning Zoom call every morning at 6 a.m. and go, okay, listen, let's all agree not to publish the Hunter Biden story. And yet they acted as if they did. In other words, they acted in coordination, not a single thing about it. Why wasn't there a solitary journalist at the Dallas Morning News or the Sacramento Bee or the Baltimore Sun who goes, listen, if all my colleagues don't want to cover the story, this is the biggest story of the year, I'll cover it. It'll make me famous. It'll be my story. But not even a single one did that, which tells you that that solitary journalist, and there must have been more than one, who got the idea of doing that, a second thought immediately occurred to them, which was, listen, I better not. If I do this, my colleagues will turn against me. My boss will get rid of me. I will never work in this town again. I'll be excommunicated from my social life and the circles I move in. The sword of Damocles is going to fall on my head. So as a result, there was not a single defector, and the New York Post was alone, and everybody else ganged up on the Post to shut the story down.
Unreal. And yet they knew that they had a true story, which Twitter said, you know, if you'll just deny the story and take it down, we'll take you out of Twitter jail. And they stood their ground, and they said, no, we know that this story is true. That's when they, you know, started dropping these 51 intelligence advisors. And many of these people, shame on them, they've come out later and said, well, I just signed my name because so-and-so was signing theirs, and so-and-so was signing theirs. Or there was one, and his name just slipped me right now, but he said, you know, I don't regret putting it on, even knowing it was a lie, because I would never trust Russia. This had nothing to do with Russia. This had everything to do with getting Biden in and removing Trump.
Absolutely. It was, and it shows you the my film Police State emphasizes that the police state in America has a distinctive American character. It's not like police states elsewhere in all respects. It has some common elements that you find in all police states. All police states have mass surveillance. They have systematic censorship. They have a lot of indoctrination in the schools and in the media. They tend to be one-party states. They go after and try to lock up the leader of the opposition party. They have political prisoners. So there are many elements of police states, North Korea, China, the old Soviet Union, that we do see now in the United States. But I think what makes our police state unique is it's a police state that marches behind the banner of saving democracy, protecting truth against misinformation and disinformation, upholding the law, affirming freedom. So there's a lot of rhetorical flim-flam around our police state. And the job of my film is to sort of remove the veil so that people can see the police state in its naked brutality.
Yeah, and it's an excellent film. I can't wait for people in my audience to watch it. My father-in-law is also a filmmaker. He made a documentary called The Real Dr. Anthony Fauci, and his film was attacked 24 hours a day, just from every direction they could find. They had to clone their stuff, move it to a different server. Have you guys had anything like that with your film?
Yeah, we have. And I'm happy to talk about it. I'll say a word about Fauci because what's interesting about that guy, again, is he illustrates the sort of very peculiar nature of our police state. See, if our police state was a full-fledged police state, it would not need to create subterfuge. It could be blatant, right? If you're in Soviet Russia in the era of Stalin and they want to come arrest you, they go, "Come with me." And if you say, "For what?" they're like, "We don't care. We're not obliged to tell you for what. You're just on a list. If you don't come, we're going to smash you over the head and take you with us." So a full-fledged police state does not have to make explanations of what it's doing. But a police state that is kind of under construction, kind of in the making, has to rely on a lot of deception. So what I think about Fauci that's really interesting is that, so here's Fauci, he's funding all this gain-of-function research, and he probably thinks, in a pointy-headed way that it's something that's very clever, it's going to result in all this new knowledge, but nevertheless, the virus gets out in Wuhan, we're giving money to groups in America that are in business with Wuhan, so Fauci goes, whoa, this is going to backfire on me, on the NIH, on the US government, it's going to put us, quote, in bed with China. So he goes, we need to be able to show, or at least claim, that this came out of a wet market. So what does Fauci do? He finds all these world-class virologists, but he also realizes they're on his payroll. They get grants from the NIH and from the government. So he goes, I want you guys to sort of change your opinion and write a paper showing that the virus came out of a wet market. Think about this. So these virologists go, okay, well, we know which side of the bread the butter is on, so we'll do that. And they do it. And then, to me, the final tableau, Fauci has a press conference. And even though he commissioned the paper, he asked them to do it, he saw it in advance, he pretends like he just saw it. He's like, a group of very prominent independent virologists have just put out a paper I see right here, and it insists that this came out of a wet market. I mean, look at this kind of massively cunning operation that is put out to prey on the gullibility of the public. And here you see the key point, that the censorship that they do is not because they're trying to oppose misinformation. They actually are trying to oppose legitimate information that is a critique of their lies. So here you had Rachel Walensky, the CDC director, saying basically, if you take the vaccine, you cannot get COVID. If you take the vaccine, you cannot give somebody else COVID. She's on tape saying this. Flat out lies, yet nobody dreams of censoring her. But if you criticize her, boom, you're off of YouTube.
Yeah, wow. I had to be super careful during all of that because I didn't want to lose my voice and my platform. So I can definitely relate to that on a personal level. Like you said, thank God for Elon Musk divulging the truth of what was really going on, this hand-in-hand relationship. But it does seem like, to me anyway, even more than Twitter, there was a alliance or a collusion between getting Biden elected and Facebook and getting Trump removed. For example, manipulating the algorithms suppressing damning stories, amplifying Democrat voices, and then personally pumping $400 million into the election process. And what do you know? Almost all of that money goes towards Democrats. You allude to Zuckerberg and the Hunter Biden laptop story. Could you maybe elaborate on that just a little more for my audience?
Yeah, well, in the Hunter Biden laptop story, we show Zuckerberg and he's being interviewed. I think he might have been, I'm not sure if it was Joe Rogan, maybe.
Joe
But in
Rogan.
any event, he's on the show and he goes, yeah, the FBI came to us and they said, Facebook, you got to be extremely vigilant and wary because the Russians have got their, dirty hands in the 2020 election the same way as they did in the 2016 election. And see, what they were doing is setting up Facebook for them to come back a little bit later and say, in effect, the Hunter Biden story. See, we told you, we warned you this was coming, and here it is. So don't touch the Hunter, even though, and this is again the key point, as in the example I gave with Fauci, the FBI knew full well that the laptop was authentic. It had too much direct information involving Hunter Biden himself, and information that had clearly been uploaded by Hunter Biden himself, and it was clearly accurate. So at the most, the Russians somehow got their hands on it, but where the information came from, its veracity, was obviously the corrupt dealings and the, in some cases, perverted dealings of the Bidens. So they knew that all of this stuff on the laptop was true. That's why they wanted to suppress it. This is the key point. A lot of times censorship is not about suppressing what's false. It's ultimately about suspending what is true, but inconvenient to the regime.
Yeah. I just want to take a sidebar really quick because this is fresh in the news, but you did another movie by the name of 2000 Mules about ballot stuffing in Georgia. And you used actual footage and geo-tracking to build your case for your documentary. How shocked were you last week when a judge in Bridgeport, Connecticut, actually overturned a mayor race because of the exact stuff that you showed in 2000 Mules of people gathering ballots and then stuffing them in the middle of the night or in plain day sight? I mean, how shocked were you when you saw an election actually overturned because of the very evidence that you were putting out months ago?
I mean, I was not shocked at all. If you looked at the images, in fact, many people did. Miranda Devine at the New York Post was like, I feel like I'm watching 2000 Mules all over again. The surveillance footage is almost identical and the same pattern, right? You've got these people, they come with sort of backpacks or they're chock full of ballots. Where they get the ballots from is unexplained. They make multiple trips to the drop box or drop boxes. You see them putting sheaves of ballots in one after the other. And even the judge in Bridgeport was like horrified. He's like, this is, and in election law, the key is not that you have to prove that you won the election. You simply have to prove that the outcome is in doubt. In other words, that we don't really know, based on this fraud, who really won. And the judge was like, that's enough for me. Election overturned. Now, very interestingly, in the three cases, which are, by the way, all in court, they all involve Democrats. They involve primary elections. In other words, these are Democrats stealing the election from other Democrats. And I think this is interesting because it tells me that the behavior revealed in 2000 Mules has actually been perfected by Democrats who have been doing it for years, and even doing it to each other, and doing it not just at the federal level, but at the local level. So they've been practicing this stuff. They've become expert at it. And all they did was they took advantage of COVID in 2020 to ramp up the scale of it. And that's how they essentially pulled off stealing and rigging the 2020 election. I think ultimately this whole story is going to be out there. When we covered it in the movie, a lot of the areas we covered, which were Philadelphia, and the Atlanta area, Fulton County, we covered also Phoenix, Milwaukee, Detroit. Well, these are heavily Democratic areas for the most part. And so I knew that Democratic officials are not going to want to investigate election fraud by Democrats. And that's why, to me, it was a bit of a vindication to see that even at the local level here in Bridgeport, Connecticut, guess what? Not only are they talking about a stolen election, but a stolen election involving bad voter rolls, absentee ballots, mail-in drop boxes, and in one case, getting paid $10 per illegal vote. And if you watch 2000 Mules, they talk about how much are these mules paid per illegal vote that they cast. And Greg Phillips in the film goes, $10 a vote. And it's the exact same amount that pops up now, I believe, in the Connecticut or maybe the Massachusetts case.
Yeah, I just saw Massachusetts this morning on Daily Mail where the person was out greeting people and offering to hug them, and then he's handing them $10 bills. And it's caught on camera from multiple angles and multiple locations. And so there was another one, I should have looked this up, but it was one of the southern states where the Democrat came out and said, hey, we have evidence that you guys are trying to steal this election. And they actually, end up booting somebody out. But it is a pattern that we're seeing over and over again. Another pattern that we're seeing that I'm grateful that you brought to attention in your film is you draw a distinction between the overt use of authority to control people, the public, versus a covert style where at the FBI or police, they go after individual families in order to scare and control them. Could you maybe just elaborate on the overt, which would be like communism in your face, versus the covert, they just go after and use scare tactics to get everyone else to comply?
Yeah, I think that I wanted to show in the film a lot of ordinary people who come face to face with the police state. And this is really important because, and of course, we focused a little bit in this conversation on Trump, and rightly so. Trump is the primary target of the police state. I mean, the fact that he's facing 90 plus indictments. Look, if they filed a single indictment and said, listen, you have these classified documents, you're stubbornly holding on to them, you won't give them back, so we are forced to file a criminal charge, and we're hoping to just extract those documents. But no, this is a shotgun approach, right? We're going to get you in DC. If we can't, we'll try in Florida. If not, we'll try in Georgia. If not, we'll try in New York. If the federal case doesn't work, we'll try to ruin your businesses. Classic police state thuggery. But I know there's going to be people in the country who go, I'm not Donald Trump, and I didn't go in the Capitol in January 6th, so I pay my taxes, Dinesh, and, I'm okay. And I wanted to show, no, there's a lot of ordinary guys, moms who are getting involved in their children's education, pro-life activists, traditional Catholics, and suddenly these people find I'm under surveillance. Why? I'm being charged. Why? And so the police state ultimately becomes very promiscuous, very undiscriminating in its choice of targets. And the levels of brutality vary. In some cases, it's not even brutality, but it's like, why are you doing this? For example, it is revealed in the movie, I believe for the first time, that we have hundreds of air marshals in the country now, today, who are following around people who flew to DC between January 3rd and January 7th of 2021. Now, am I talking about people who went in the Capitol? No. Am I talking about people who went to the Trump rally? No. I'm talking about people who flew to DC for whatever reason. You could be a kid in a divorce case, 15 years old, going to spend the weekend with your dad. You happen to go to DC. Guess what? You are now labeled a potential terrorist. And if you fly now on an airplane, there's an air marshal flying on your plane. Think about that. Think about how insane that is. And yet that's what they're doing. Now you may go, don't they know it's insane? The answer is yes. They know it's insane. Why are they doing it? Because they want to show in their metrics that they are following thousands of potential domestic terrorists. And then they go to Congress and go, well, we need a massive appropriation of money for the TSA and for the air marshals, because not only are we fighting against threats coming from abroad, 9/11 style, we are following all these domestic terrorists at home. And then Congress stupidly goes, oh, this is very dangerous. Yes, here's all this money. Come back and tell us if you need more. So this is the racket that is being played, and it's classic police state stuff. Now, are they shooting these people? Are they arresting them? No, they're just following them. But the pointlessness of it, the fact that, and think about it, some kid goes to DC to meet his dad. They all go to lunch. His dad brings, let's just say, his some guy from work to join them. Guess what? That guy's name could end up on a list. And then they start following that guy. So this is going on in the United States right now.
Yeah, the air marshal, the woman mentioned that what if it was, I think it was prior to 9/11, they had 33 people in the agency, and now it's ballooned to thousands and thousands of people. I mean, just think how much taxpayer money they're using to follow a grandma, to follow, a pastor, a child that's, split between mom and dad because of a divorce and living in different states. It's just the abuse of our tax money is absolutely insane. But like you say, it's not just Trump. It's regular people. It's moms. One of the stories that I told my wife about, and she was horrified. I said, the FBI labeled parents as domestic terrorists for questioning their education, for questioning a transgender in a bathroom that violated a girl, for the types of books that are in their library. I mean, it was crazy. Do you know, is this still going on, or was that a one-off case?
No, it's unfortunately it's going on, and what's happened is that because of the very vast kind of accordion-like nature of the federal law book, they can always find something. This is really why when people say to me, I haven't done anything, I usually say, all right, listen, you tell me about your life in some detail for 10 minutes, and I will tell you 3 federal charges that can be brought against you just based upon what you tell me. It's very easy to do. So, for example, there are some pro-life people, and I had one on my podcast today in the movie. And all they're doing is they're protesting outside of abortion clinics. They're trying to talk women out of having abortions. Now, the FACE Act, which is a federal statute, says you cannot interfere with the provision of reproductive services. But interfere in the law has always meant you can't physically block these women from getting into the clinics. But the Biden administration is interpreting interfere by meaning persuade. You cannot even say things like, you're killing your baby. Please don't do that. Come talk to me. Come pray with me. I hope you'll see the light. I hope you change your mind. You're not allowed to do that. That is considered interfering with someone getting reproductive services. What? Some woman exercising a free speech rights outside a clinic on public property, and yet it's considered interference. Suddenly you don't have the right to do that. So what I'm getting at is that we are seeing in all kinds of places in America sort of an escalation of these police state tactics. And remember, again, these issues are controversial. People can debate about abortion all day. They can debate about whether or not there should be certain types of books in libraries. But it's one thing as part of the democratic give and take to be arguing about it. It's another whole thing to call the cops on you.
Yeah. One of the people featured in your film, and I didn't write down her name, I apologize, but she came here from North Korea, and she talks about some of it almost reminds me of when Ayn Rand came to America, 50, 60 years ago, and starts pointing out, wait a minute, these are tactics being used over in Russia. And she points out some of the stuff in North Korea. And I went on and did a little bit of research. In North Korea, you have like a dozen haircuts you can choose from. They pick the clothes and the job you're going to have. It's illegal to grow food. They spy and rat each other out if they've eaten too much. What was this young lady's name, and what was the part of interviewing her that maybe made it into the film or didn't make it into the film that stood out to you the most?
Her name is Yeonmi Park. She's a young woman in her 20s, and she's one of the few people that has gotten out alive from North Korea. There are tens of thousands of people who have tried to get out. Only a handful, like she gave me the number, it's something like 110 have successfully done it. In her case, she was smuggled out by missionaries who took her to China, and then ultimately she got to South Korea, and then she came to America, and she actually enrolled at Columbia University. The thing that I found so striking is she said at Columbia, she saw the same kind of mind-numbing indoctrination going on of students that goes on in North Korea. And by the way, on the same ideology. capitalism is evil, the free market is an illusion, that society needs to be reconstructed from the ground up. We have to overthrow the US Constitution. America's the bad guy. White people are evil. She goes, man, this could have been my North Korean professor transposed with just a little bit of a different haircut and a different look. And then she started pointing these things out, and they accused her of being brainwashed. They go, you're brainwashed. And then I think this is actually one of the few sort of laugh lines in the movie, and I didn't even quite intend it to be. She goes, but at least in North Korea, she goes, we accept the distinction between a man and a woman. She goes, in Colombia, they kept telling me, well, Yeonmi, you can be a man. And she's like, well, no, I just got married. I just became a mom. I'm a woman. They're like, no, you can't be, you can be a man. And so she goes, Colombia was even crazier than North Korea.
Yeah. Boy, it's amazing the last, 10 days to see in Columbia, Yale, Harvard, all of these billionaires and wealthy people pulling their money out because they're allowing anti-Semitist, gatherings and things like that. That's just a sidebar, but it's been fascinating to me where it's like, hey, listen, if the school's not going to do this, then we're going to get names. You guys are never going to work on Wall Street. Don't bother applying for a CPA job. All of a sudden that cancel culture got flipped on the group that normally does the canceling. I found that to be somewhat ironic.
It's interesting on so many different levels. One of them, I think, is that in a sense, it took anti-Semitism the last straw for these philanthropists to step in. So you notice that they haven't stepped in any time until now. And in fact, when Larry Summers, the former president of Harvard, was like, oh, I'm so grieved. He's like, I don't even recognize Harvard. This is not the institution to which I've devoted my adult life. I'm thinking, well, yeah, I get it. But you know what, Larry? You've been the president of Harvard. You have been one of the most influential people in that institution over the past 25 years. Guess who enabled the environment that Harvard has become? Who did not object when conservative professors were rooted out? Who allowed the left to create a full takeover of the institution? Who allowed the establishment of an anti-colonial ideology that basically sees white guys and any ally of the United States as the bad guy? You did. You were part of that. You at least you didn't speak out against it until now. So now at the late stage, when all of this comes to fruition, and now you see that these people, even though the same people who have been, complaining about microaggressions and that guy didn't use my pronouns and I feel threatened, suddenly become cheerleaders for Hamas, rape, murder, and mass terrorism. The chickens have come home to roost, so to speak, and now you're horrified. But I'm sorry to say that you, in a sense, have been part of the problem.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that the very groups that are, calling to free Palestine are the very groups that would be killed if they lived in Palestine. It's kind of, again, just another irony of life. I have Alan Dershowitz coming on this week to talk about that a little bit more. But in your film, The Police State, you shared several true stories of people that have now been proven innocent, where the FBI and the DOJ ruined their lives, turned their lives upside down, shamed them just for being near the Capitol on January 6th. So it's not even the bad actors. It's not even the people that did the vandalism. Just for being near the Capitol, they're now targeting people and trying to label them as a domestic terrorism. This has gone too far. I'm so glad that you put this into your film, but as you heard these stories, what were your thoughts?
Well, at the human level, I just felt the pathos of it, the horror of it. We profile an old man, and there are many people, by the way, who see the film who break down into tears at this point. This is a film that's quite moving in many ways, but this is one of the more moving scenes. Is you've got this 75-year-old guy, And he's a little bit of a character. He's sort of an apartment manager in New York, really nice guy, well known in the local community and well respected. And he's like, I'm not really a Trumpster per se, but there's all this stuff going on in January 6th, the big rally. I've never been to something like that. He's kind of a guy who likes to take videos. Says, I want to take my video camera. I'm going to go down there. So he goes down there, takes all this video. He sees all these people moving toward the Capitol, and he goes that way too. But the moment he sees people climbing on the rafters, he's like, something's wrong here. I'm not going any further. This is not right. So he goes home. He goes back to New York, and he rounds up a bunch of his buddies, kind of like in old school style. He's showing them his video. And guess what? A neighbor walks by and sees him, and then almost like in classic Soviet style, reports him to the FBI. And what does the FBI do? They plan a raid on his apartment, and they tip off the media so that when they raid, they're going to humiliate him publicly, because NBC News is going to be there, helpfully tipped off to show up at his apartment at 6 a.m. And they smash the place, they trash it. Now, the beauty of it is this guy, because he's a high-tech guy, he had 2 cameras in his apartment. The FBI, they come up, they see the peephole, and they cover it. So they actually think about it. If they were doing stuff that's legal, why cover the camera? Why try to prevent him from recording what's happening? But they tried to, but they didn't know he had a second camera. And that's the footage that's in the movie. So you can see what this FBI raid looks like. It's not recreated. It's not my camera work. This is the official surveillance video of the FBI smashing into your apartment. And then he left the apartment in the condition when they left. And you can see it looks like Gaza. I mean, it is leveled and trashed beyond recognition. And this is for a guy, as you said, who did nothing. He went to DC and he went to the rally, but he did not set 1 foot inside of the US Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I mean, one of the FBI consultants that you have in the movie, Stephen Friend, he came on my show to expose some of this stuff. But in your show, he mentions that there in Washington, D.C., there's like this huge appetite for domestic terrorism data and cases. And they're incentivizing them. They're literally giving out like bonuses for drumming up this domestic terrorism, yet the supply is really, really low. And so they're like trying to like come up with cases so that they can get that supply up. Tell us maybe just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in fact, let's go beyond even the movie, because you use the word drumming up. And really what you're talking about is the fact that the FBI became masters of fabricating terrorism cases by finding fertile candidates and then provoking them to do things that they would not otherwise do. Now, they started this after 9/11. I think what happened is they got a whole bunch of money. And now we use the FBI. I want to be clear. We're talking about the police agencies of the government, not just the FBI. We're using the FBI here as a metaphor. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, is 10 to 15 times bigger than the FBI, much bigger budget, very actively involved in censorship, very actively involved in political targeting. But we're going to talk about the FBI to keep it simple. The FBI, I think, expected more terrorism after 9/11, but it may be that U.S. forces had bombed, the Al-Qaeda guys over there. They were in disarray. They just had no ability to carry on that kind of operation. So suddenly the terrorism after 9/11 kind of was not occurring. But the FBI was like, wait a minute, this means our budget's going to dry up. Congress is going to realize that this stuff just isn't going to be happening, at least not at any massive scale in America. So they were like, let's create some terrorism. Now, how do you do that? Well, what you do is you basically let's find 3 Syrian guys who are students at NYU. And these are your typical kind of Islamic radicals. They hate the US, they hate the US government and so on. They're like, yeah, I'd love to see the US come down. And so what does the FBI do? Is they create informants. And the informants go to these guys and go, you've been talking all this big talk about bringing down the US and stuff. Have you ever considered joining ISIS? And the guys go, oh, no, man, we're not going to join ISIS. Well, you're talking about being a soldier of Allah, and you're talking about being a great jihadi. Well, are you too scared to join ISIS? Oh, no, man, we'll join ISIS if we knew how to, but, we don't know. Well, as it turns out, there's an ISIS training camp occurring in Yemen next year. You want to go? Oh, no, I can't go. I don't have a passport. Well, what if we got you a passport? What if we got you a plane ticket? You see what's going on here? The FBI, the US government is enticing these guys into signing up for something that they would not otherwise have done on their own. And then, of course, right when they show up at JFK Airport to board the flight for their ISIS training, busted. There's the FBI press conference. There's the media. We're amazing. Busted a plot against the United States. This whole thing is just, I mean, it's so pathetic. It's so disgusting. It's such a frame up. It's such a setup. And then having perfected those tactics on the Muslims, it's like, you know what, under Obama, how about if we take the same schema and now start moving it over to conservatives and Republicans and patriots and Christians? So when they set up the Whitmer kidnapping hoax, excuse me, which preceded, of course, January 6th, same playbook, exact same playbook, except here they found some white guys who are mighty ticked off, hated Gretchen Whitmer. Same thing. You guys are talking big about Gretchen Whitmer. Have you ever thought of the idea of kidnapping her? Oh man, that would be great. But we wouldn't know how to go about that. We're not going to kidnap her. Well, why not? I happen to know that she has a summer house. You want to go check it out? I'll drive you there. This is the kind of thing that the government does. And it is, I mean, I got to say, as an immigrant, I am heartbroken, disgusted that this is going on in a supposedly free society. It shows the gangsterization of our government and the way in which the left and the Democratic Party has supported and built up this gangster regime in this country.
Yeah, it's I don't want to give away too much of the film because I want people to see it. But one of the key things that stood out to me was Trump's former advisor, Kash Patel, who said in the documentary that he heard with his own ears in a conversation he was having with President Donald Trump that Trump was concerned about the crowd size and the intelligence around the Capitol and had offered $10,000 to $20,000 in National Guardsmen. But that Mayor Bowser and Nancy Pelosi shot down the idea. Then those same people go on to say this was never offered. We were completely caught off guard. And now as time goes by, we're finding out Yogananda Pittman received a security briefing. She withheld it from the chief's son. And it's like all of the truth starts coming out just a little bit too late. But if all the intelligence was that there were going to be violent groups there, and they knew that, it seems that Trump was almost set up. So just, hey, let them walk in. We'll cover for you that we didn't know they were coming. And then boom, we have the biggest story in the last decade since 9/11 that we've now got Trump, and he has to be removed from all 50 state ballots.
Now, absolutely. The question that I think this is where the movie really excels on January 6th, is it supplies the hidden motive for why the Democrats really wanted January 6th to happen. Notice that the conventional wisdom, the story of the January 6th committee, is that the Trumpsters wanted to stop a proceeding, right? And what was that proceeding? Well, according to the left, it was the certification of the election. The Trumpsters did not want that to happen. That's why they went inside the Capitol. The flaw in this narrative is simply this. The process that was going on, that was in fact stopped, was not the certification of the election, but the questioning of the election. In other words, what was actually going on was that one senator after another were challenging the results of the election. They wanted to challenge Arizona. They were going to challenge Georgia. They were going to challenge Wisconsin, all the swing states. So who wanted that stopped? Not the Trumpsters. The Trumpsters actually came to Washington for that to continue. It was Nancy Pelosi. It was Chuck Schumer. It was the Democrats who wanted to stop the questioning of the 2020 election. And in fact, the moment that the Trumpsters got into the building, that process was in fact stopped, and it was never resumed. When the Congress got back, they didn't have the heart to continue. Basically, they're like, okay, fine, let's just certify Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and the deed was done. So here's the point. That is the motive for orchestrating January 6th. And by orchestrating here, what we mean is leaving the doors strategically open with lots of cops around. But you notice that in all those incidents, all that time you saw people in the building, did you ever see policemen ever say into a bullhorn, everybody get out, everybody evacuate the building, no one is allowed to be here? That was never done. So think about it. Let's just say you or I go to DC or go to the Louvre in Paris and we're in the museum and there are some paintings down the hall. But let's even say that there's a sign that says, this hall is under construction, don't go down here. But there's a police officer sitting down there. And as you walk toward the corridor, he doesn't stop you. He doesn't say, hey, listen, you're not allowed to go past that rope. You just walk past him, he greets you, you walk back out, he greets you again. You obviously are going to assume that what you're doing is allowed because you've got someone in authority there who's not telling you otherwise. And that's exactly what we saw on January 6th. And yet, later they pretend like, oh, no. This was a case where the policemen were under siege. This was an assault on the Capitol, military style, somewhat similar to the Civil War. Nonsense upon nonsense upon nonsense. And it's really important to strip the veil off of all of this. And this is really, I think, the power of the movie. Many people will be familiar with this or that aspect of it, as I'm sure you were, but there's a certain kind of collective power in putting the story together so that you see the full extent of what's going on in the country.
Yeah, when Representative Troy Nails said, when we came back at 9 o'clock at night, we just didn't question anything. We just let Joe Biden be. It was like, oh, whoa, they got their way. Oh my gosh.
They got their way.
People need to see that because the way that you show that was really, really well done. So kudos to you guys for accomplishing that and getting that truth out. Real quick, just a question. Just this week, a group of pro-Palestinian protesters marched in DC peacefully, but then when the sun went down, hundreds of them were vandalizing buildings and parks. They marched on the White House. They had to shut the gates, bring in the police. They were screaming and just like moving the gates, trying to get in, screaming that Biden was allowing genocide. They were rubbing red paint as if it were fake blood all over the beautiful white stone pillars. Are any of these people going to be treated the same way as the January 6th people?
I mean, there are January 6 guys who are serving years for doing less than what I saw the activists doing. The other thing that I find interesting is that when Democrats and leftists do these things, you can see that they have no fear that they're going to be held to the same standard. They know that they're truly above the law. I mean, think about when Jamal Bowman pulled a fire extinguisher. First of all, he lifts the sign so you can tell he knows what he's doing. He fully knows what he's doing. But I'm sure it didn't cross his mind for 1 second. I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to be charged. I'm going to be locked up for months before my trial. I might be in solitary confinement. It never crossed his mind. He knew that would never happen to him. Similarly, when all the Palestinian activists were in, I believe it was the Cannon building. Look at their faces. I mean, do you see a hint of fear? We're going to be grabbed and seized. We're going to be thrown into a cell and basically given 23 hours of darkness and 1 hour of sunlight. Our case will come up 6 months from now and we may get further prison time. No, they were like, guess what? If they arrest us, it's going to be symbolic. We're going to be out in the morning. So in other words, what I'm getting at is not only are there two systems of justice, but the party that is above the law knows it and acts like it.
According to everything they say about Trump, nobody's above the law, but you're right. They act with a certain amount of confidence. I like how he pulled the fire alarm and then thought, oh, this is what will open the emergency door. I mean, such a blatant lie. Like, how do you get to your age and not know how a fire alarm works?
Well, the point is that it's almost like these days they tell these lies almost with a wink. It's like everybody, the media knows you're lying, but they go with the lie. Right? Because think about it. If this guy were lying, you would think that there would be a barrage of media criticism. The next time he's seen in public, 40 reporters encircling him. You, sir, aren't you a former school superintendent? Don't you know how a fire alarm works? Is it really believable? But you notice that didn't happen. So Jamal Bowman knows I'm not going to be held to account. So many elements of our media have just turned into basically the American version of Goebbels style propaganda. And so as a result, they're going to be basically covering for me. They're not going to be holding me to account. They'll be defending me against anybody who tries to point out my lies.
Yeah. Yeah. That confidence to do stuff because you know the media will back you is amazing. It's how Big Pharma was able to get away with so much. You guys covered the COVID story nicely in there, but There's a meme on the internet where it's like a superhero and there's a red button here and a red button. He's sweating. I don't know which one to push. And I always think about like Anderson Cooper, who like $7 to $10 million of his annual salary comes from big pharma. And it's like, oh, do I tell the truth about big pharma or do I keep my $7 to $10 million salary? He is never going to badmouth big pharma. He is never going to tell you the truth about the jab in your arm, because if he did, he would lose $7 to $10 million. And in self-preservation, he is not going to do that. And the proof is he didn't do that, right? Now, you guys covered the COVID story very, very brilliantly. I don't want to go into a lot of it, but knowing that they had this power to weaponize and breed fear, so much fear into the American people was just asinine to me. I mean, government officials and talking heads saying it's child abuse not to mask up a child. Then we find out later that thousands and thousands of children are developmentally behind and the masks don't do as much. They said things like, only the vaccinated are dying, yet we know that vaccinated people were getting the virus, passing the virus, and dying from the shot. They made up the 6 feet apart bull crap. They covered up the lab leak theory. I mean, these guys knew that they had the media on their side to make Trump look bad and to scare the hell out of the American people. Is this a form of the police state?
Well, the police state needs a rationale or a pretext for taking away people's freedoms that they would not otherwise give up. And when COVID came along, the left realized, they're like, you know what? This is fantastic, because the one group of people that everybody trusts without question is a doctor in a lab coat, right? I mean, think about it. I go to the doctor says, I'm going to administer 12 tests. We never say, well, why? Who needs 12 tests? Tell me about each one so I can decide whether it's, or even the doctor says, I want to take out your appendix. You never go, why? Why don't I take out yours? In other words, you trust that what he's telling you is for your own good. And so fear turns us into conformists. And the left will realize that we can make that work for us politically. I mean, we normally can never shut down a church, but we can shut down religious liberty under COVID. And they did. And so if we look at the 3 events that have done the most in recent years to build up the police state, it's the fear after 9/11, it's the fear of COVID, and it's the fomented fear on January 6th. And those were used to create and expand censorship, to create and expand the government's surveillance powers, to create and expand political targeting, to turn ordinary citizens into potential criminals. All of this occurred under so the rationale varies, but I think part of what we're saying in the movie is that the movement is always in the same direction. So that if you now just go back to the Bill of Rights, the good old Bill of Rights that were given to us by the framers, the unalienable rights that are not subject to political negotiation, right to free speech, right to assembly, right to religious freedom, right to petition the government, right to assemble, equal rights and equal justice under the law. And you go down that list, you realize, wait a minute, not even one of those rights today is completely secure. So this is why it's not an exaggeration to ask the question, are we moving toward a police state? Because our basic liberties are under siege right now.
Yeah. Well, I can't say how much I appreciated the video. I highly recommend it to everybody. It was great. A few things just really quickly. You're going to find out why they were targeting Catholics and how that's the gateway to get half of the country. You're going to learn about the 85,000 missing children and what's really going on there, the southern border, so many other topics that you guys masterfully covered. If people want to see the film, tell us one more time and then I'll let you go.
The film is available both in streaming and on DVD. So it's really great. You can stream it, watch it on your big screen TV. And the website is policestatefilm.net. So it's streaming on the Rumble platform. It's also streaming on Salem Now and Epoch TV. You can buy DVDs from Shopify or you can buy them from Salem Now, but all those links are on the website. So policestatefilm.net is the place to go. Choose where to stream, choose how to get your DVDs. By the way, they're great gifts to load up on and share. People will thank you. This is a movie that's getting people really informed and really riled up because it works on you on an emotional level as well as on an intellectual level. And I think I'm right in saying, and maybe you'll confirm, this is a movie that holds your attention from start to finish. It's a captivating movie, and you're learning things all along the way. And I think you'll be blown away by the end of it.
Yeah, I learned a lot and I really enjoyed it. Dinesh, thank you so much for all that you do and your efforts in this and making this movie. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
I appreciate it.